the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Pro. Take your podcast to the next level with professional tools, custom content creation, and a helping hand from A to Z. You need quality, you need consistency, you need to stand out among the millions of podcasts that now exist on the social channels like this one. Visit AuthenticAudioPro.com today. My name is Mike Ginnitti. Sunday, August 11th, a little bit early today as we step away for a few days, but wanted to jump into some quarterback conversations before we really get thick into the weeds of this NFL offseason / regular season. It's time. We're starting to see some of these starters play a few minutes here and there. Certainly the camp and preseason battles are in full swing. We'll have a slew of roster cuts, some re-signs, some waiver claims, the whole kit and caboodle to get these 90-man rosters down to 53, then back up to 55 with IR and game day recalls and 16-man practice squads. I've got all that information posted on Twitter, by the way, or X or Threads or wherever you follow. We're everywhere now. The practice squads will operate as they have the past couple of seasons, 16 players. You have a good number of players who don't have any accrued seasons limit, so you can stash a couple of veterans, and most teams will for the bounty of this regular season, especially some running backs and some linebackers and some positions that you know you're going to need some extra bodies for come week 12 / week 17, right? So slight increase in pay over last year, but as per the CBA, all of this information is available on SpotTrack.com. But like I said, I've recently posted the latest numbers, and teams are going to have to account for this as roster cuts happen, and we flip the switch from top 51 cap to full total cap, which won't happen until actual week 1. But we're certainly showing all of these numbers right now on each team page. Practice squads will become, a couple $1 million here and there, as some of these veterans get near minimum salaries, and about $220,000 for your 17-week payout of just the standard old 0 to 2 accrued season player. It matters. It's necessary. Every team needs it. That's why they expanded it. That's why they increased the pay in this CBA. And teams will have to account for it and budget for that, not only at the start of the season, but the ebbs and flows of releasing these players and guaranteeing them a couple of weeks worth of pay and all that stuff that goes into managing the in-season of the NFL, which is actually much more complicated than just the standard free agency draft process that we go through from March to May. It's a daily grind, and we're starting to get into the weeds, like I said, with big-time roster cuts around the corner. So let's settle back, let's settle in, and let's talk about this most important position, of course, the quarterback, from a team-by-team standpoint, because, we're in a pretty sweet spot league-wide, I would say. More than half of the teams, I think, are comfortable, at least for this year, and maybe it's fair to say this and next year for a lot of that, and that's kind of the point of what we're doing here. That's the exercise. Which teams really don't have to think too much about this, not only for the next 4 months, but maybe for the next 16 months. All right, this time next year, next August, which teams will continue to have little to no worries, whether it's performance-wise and certainly contractually speaking, at their most dominated position, the quarterback position. We're going right down the line here, and we've got something to say really about everybody, right? Kyler Murray, one of the most polarizing contracts we've had in this decade, because he's been one of the most polarizing players, whether it's video games or homework or CBA rules or the actual guarantee structure of his contract, which is nuts and bolts, rock solid. He's got a little bit of everything for us. And what we have to say about this really is this is as good as I've ever felt about Kyler Murray right now, today. Maybe on draft day, there was a lot of hope that may have dissipated fairly quickly. But for the most part, this is a player and a roster and a set of weapons now that I think make a heck of a lot of sense. The running backs are much more than adequate. I think everybody in the world now, if you've opened up a fantasy notebook and done a mock draft or maybe even just started to get yourself mildly prepared for a fantasy draft this season are fully in the Trey McBride era, and they will be too. And Kyler Murray certainly will be. And of course, Marvin Harrison, maybe a name we're not hearing enough of from a football standpoint because his licensing deal and lack of contract signed for forever kind of dominated his offseason. He's a superstar in the making, at least. And we'll see what kind of first season he and Kyler Murray can have. Contractually speaking, I mentioned this thing was rock solid when it was signed in 2022. We're only about halfway through it. And that's just the guaranteed portion. Okay. This is an 7-year deal, excuse me. This is year 3. It's all fully guaranteed. 2025 is all fully guaranteed. And this time next year, 2026, will be fully guaranteed. There's some early roster bonuses that start next offseason. They have yet to process a cap conversion on this contract because big signing bonus, big option bonus. So they took that approach with it. This is kind of the first big meat potato season. Fairly consistent cash flow. It actually dips quite a bit in 2025 down to 32 million and then jumps back up to 42 million in 2026. So from a cash standpoint, interestingly speaking, Arizona gets a little bit of relief next year, which could come in handy with, like I said, if this is a step forward season in Arizona, this is going to be an aggressive team. They have shed a ton of cap, a ton of pieces, especially defensively speaking. That's the area they're going to have to really ramp up with, in my opinion. Any kind of glimmers of hope in 2024 could be big news next March with this team. Kyler Murray's locked in for 4 more seasons. He's tradable. We had plenty of trade discussions throughout this contract over the past 18 months or so. I don't think we're going to have those, at least for the foreseeable future, unless the wheels completely fall off with a lot of the changes that have been made in Arizona. 4 more fully guaranteed years, at least practically guaranteed years on this Kyler Murray contract. Behind him, it's kind of just throwing some darts, right? Desmond Ridder came over from Atlanta, and Clayton Tune is a player that they're just kind of hoping to stash and at least make progress into a solid backup quarterback at some point in time. Though, he's got pedigree. He knows where he came from. Atlanta. We've had discussions ad nauseum about this roster, and I don't think anybody's have real answers. And of course, something I told you back in March is now finally coming to the forefront, at least from a rumor standpoint. On August 10th, they have 3 quarterbacks, and I don't think they want 3 quarterbacks. I'm pretty positive that Taylor Heineke was never long for this roster. The problem is he's got guaranteed money, and he's way overpaid for a 3rd quarterback. So I don't know that they have an out on this one. If they don't want to roster Taylor Heineke, outside of some sort of injury that happens in the preseason here over the next week or so, I don't know why anybody would take on this contract. It's $9.8 million cash. Okay, they've paid out a little over 1.3 on that per a roster bonus. They gave him a little signing bonus restructure here, but for the most part, this is just a well overpaid backup quarterback who at one point in time was competing for a starting role with Desmond Ridder. And that's just where this thing started and where we are now. There's Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. standing in front of this contract now. My guess is they're just going to have to outright release him and take the hit and move on, because this is a roster spot they're going to probably want to blossom some of these other areas of their roster that they've done at least a decent job aggressively on paper starting to attack, especially defensively speaking, which has been the Achilles heel for this roster for a very long time. We've talked about the Cousins deal quite a bit, but I will reference it here. It's $100 million guaranteed, as we all know. And there's a portion of that can be basically a buyout, and that's the $10 million in 2026. So we're looking at a deal that's 2 for 90. That's the cash flow through 2025, and that's fully guaranteed. And then there's that 10 million hanging in 2026, which I wouldn't expect Cousins would see 2026 on this contract with the Atlanta Falcons. That's his age 38 season. Can you flip a player that's due $45 million 10 of which is fully guaranteed? I don't know. Probably, because then you can rip things up and start over on something with that 10 million. But we're a long way away from that. We're injuries and playoff losses and whatever else is coming with this whole contract away from any of that discussions. The real discussion is the jockeying that's going to happen between Cousins and Penix Jr. and what happens if Cousins gets slightly injured, or what happens if he does get injured and Penix has to play, and you know where this is going. The clock has started on Penix Jr. I think there's some sympathy to be had here for what the Falcons have at least attempted to do because of the Jordan Love experience. We talked about that a couple weeks ago with Dan. I don't think that's a fair comparison. A, because Penix Jr. was a top 10 pick, and B, because they had just signed Kirk Cousins 2 months ago and then decided to draft Michael Penix Jr. weeks later. So it wasn't like they had an aging, declining contract that they were eventually going to get rid of and then, instantiate their rookie quarterback contract to go from there. This is we're taking two shots at the same time, and we're not so much worried about the timing. We just want to have the ability to say, this is now, that's next. And whenever next happens, we hope that we look like geniuses at that point in time. Look, this position is bonkers important. And I know I crapped on the whole scenario maybe 2 or 3 times, publicly speaking, because it's terrible business. There's nobody who can discount that. It's terrible business, but it might be pretty darn smart in the long run. Overpaying for this position or over assetting, I guess is what they've done, right? They've over assetted their roster. This is the position to do it with. Because if you do get a 10-year run out of this, 3 or 4 years out of Cousins, which is a lot, and then 6 or 7 out of Penix Jr., if that's your deal, and you really don't have to think about this position for the next decade, and it's just about plugging holes and adding, revolving door weapons, sure, you've made life easy for yourself. But it's not like the Cousins situation didn't have a clear cut out where you couldn't have budgeted for something in a year. To me, you did this, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I promise, until Cousins is off the field and Penix is on. To me, you did this because there has to be at least a little bit in your mind saying, what if Cousins is never a full-time quarterback again? And by full-time, I mean, what if he cannot finish even the next 18 weeks? Whether that's decline, whether that's injury, who knows? It's possible. Not everybody's Tom Brady and LeBron James, two people that have dominated this generation of sports for many of the people who follow it. All right, those are the unicorns. That's not the norm. So for Kirk Cousins to fall off a cliff here would not be inconceivable. They don't expect that cliff will bring them back down into the top 5 or 6 draft pick. They've said that publicly. So getting a quarterback that belongs in that kind of conversation could have really positive vibes at some point in time. That's all I'll say. Taylor Heineke probably released, by the way, at the end of training camp. That's my call on that. Lamar Jackson, feels like that contract just happened an hour and a half ago. It did not. Okay. We are well within this year 2 of this now. He was smart to not take, a 10 or 12 year contract. This is a 5-year contract. 4 years of that really rock solid, fully guaranteed. So year 2 of 3 more basically fully guaranteed years. Not anything you have to think about right now or next year. 2026, March of 2026 is when the noise will start to come around because there's a $75 million cap hit, which in the grand scheme of things, isn't going to be crazy. I mean, Deshaun Watson, one of the guys next up here, is going to play 2024 on a $63 million cap hit. So 3 years from now, 74 is going to be nothing. However, they're probably going to want to flex that a little bit. And with 2 years remaining on the contract, it's the good time to start talking about Lamar's next contract because he will be entering his age 29 season at that point in time. Another reason why this contract he did was extremely well produced. Josh Johnson, the ultimate backup quarterback, is, I believe, right now the QB2 on this roster, though there's a couple of young guns, I guess, who could compete with them. But the revolving door that is Josh Johnson for now may start as Lamar's QB2 out of the gate. Josh Allen, boy, we got some negative vibes about this one for sure. Because I don't regret making the Josh Allen piece and putting that out there and speaking to it a little bit, because it wasn't just me reacting to the thousands of social posts about how Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen now look like chumps compared to Burrow and Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence, etc. They don't, by the way, but Josh Allen and his cash flow and the length of his contract and where he is in his contract and his age and where the Bills may be in the next year and a half or two, all those things considered. So at least the conversation that most guys are making well north of 40 million cash per year, and Josh Allen's in the low 30s for the better part of, or has been in the low 30s. He will progress to the high 30s for the next 2 seasons after this upcoming one. But look, it would be crazy for the Bills to rip up 5 years remaining. It would be shocking if Josh Allen got the sweet in the pot that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs were able to work out, because that just doesn't happen. And Josh Allen does not have the Patrick Mahomes resume. But it would not be surprising to any of us if by this time next year, Josh Allen is at least saying something publicly about how he wishes that he and the Bills could come to a better agreement that's more modernized, that fits better with the current financial structure. All the political ways to say I'm underpaid without saying I'm underpaid. I just have a feeling that by this time next year, it's going to become at least a thing. And look out if he has a Superman Josh Allen type season to have that in his back pocket. That's all I'm saying. Mitch Trubisky's the QB2 in Buffalo, and that will not change based on his pay structure, which is slightly more than the NFL minimum. Bryce Young, year 2, lot of work to be done there. They added some weapons. We talked about Carolina quite a bit in the last Monday episode. There's at least a chance. They're at least giving him a chance. Let's put it that way, with some offensive line upgrades and some weapon changes. But Andy Dalton's still lurking. Don't be surprised if at some point in time, Andy Dalton is at least taking some snaps for this offense to, I don't know, deflate the noise that could come if Bryce Young puts another clunker or two out there early on in the season. This is a 5 quarterback roster right now, by the way. They are not screwing around. They want to see every little inch of every person possible. And who knows? Dalton's got some guaranteed money. I don't imagine he falls off this roster at all. But look, Bryce Young is going to be on notice. Teams are not screwing around with these rookie contracts anymore. They're willing to eat the dead cap and the dead cash. There's offset language. There's a lot of ways to protect him. Yep, they paid him a huge signing bonus 14 months ago. But if he's not the guy after this year, look out, because we've been down this path before and teams are not screwing around. Somebody I'm much, much less worried about in terms of 2-year bust is Caleb Williams, who I know he's talking the part, but he's at least slowly putting the walking part of it out there as well. The team has done a phenomenal job of picking pieces from everywhere, every channel, every avenue. It looks phenomenal on paper. Some of the on-field stuff from a practice perspective certainly looks like it's going to work. And it's just, how quickly can this guy ramp up to the speed of the NFL? We know that's the only question that these rookies ever have to get asked. We'll see. There's going to be some bumps, but there may be some moments pretty early on that rival what we saw out of CJ Stroud last year, just to a certain degree. Obviously, he's a name to watch. Behind him, it's probably Brett Rippon and Tyson Bagent competing for that QB2 job. They may piece squad somebody here just as some protection, some liability, but I think less is more with this position right now for them, knowing that they have, at least hypothetically speaking, the next decade quarterback in Chicago, something they have never had, quite frankly. Man, the stuff coming out of Cincinnati is scary. Scary. Doesn't seem like Joe Burrow will ever be 100% healthy Joe Burrow that we saw a couple years ago, and certainly in college. It shouldn't matter. I mean, the dude's a gamer. The dude's going to, he's going to overcome whatever the hell is going on, physically speaking, with him. But it's not great what we're hearing. Let's put it that way. It's not great about some of the guys who are willing to leave this roster in what should be one of the greatest, small generations of Cincinnati Bengals football that this franchise has ever gone through. They've had some moments, obviously, but I mean, this Burrow era is about as good as I can remember it being for this team. And it just feels like everything and everybody and every bounce goes the wrong way, right? To push against any more steps of positivity with this franchise. We'll see. This is a guy that certainly has quieted the haters before. And I am not coming at this from that perspective. I'm not saying that I wish for this to be a problem. Just seems like the dots continue to not connect for this team and for Burrow specifically in terms of being able to stay out there for 18 weeks. This is year 2 of his extension. All right. And this is a 7-year contract total, 5 years of it practically guaranteed with early vesting options. There's a bunch of option bonuses. So the cap hits are tenable, 29, 46, 48 for the next 3 years. They don't have to do anything with those if they don't want to. They could also, if things really start to go sideways from a health perspective, they could also take one of those option bonuses on as full salary to mitigate the dead cap being pushed down a little bit here and start to prepare for getting out of this thing. He's 28. Well, he will be 28 in a couple of weeks here. So this should be prime Joe Burrow. And I do think there's a world where all these rumors, and I guess that's all I can say they are for now, just go away by week 8 because this guy's lighting up the league again. And the contract looks like it's rock steady, full speed ahead for the next 4 seasons, which is what we should be talking about. For now, let's just keep it that way. It's a rock steady contract for 4 years. This should be the prime age for Joe Burrow. And quite frankly, one of the prime scenarios, right? They've got Higgins on the tag. They've got Chase on a very nice 4th-year rookie contract situation. There's some weapons there. And we don't know that Higgins will be back by any degree. I think we would expect him not to be. So it may be Chase on a gigantic contract with a bunch of rookies around him in 2025. So the iteration that we've kind of grown up with, the Burrow, Higgins, Chase model, is probably on its last leg here. And let's just hope that Joe Burrow's career as a healthy quarterback isn't as well. Behind him, well, if you watched last year and you've heard what I'm talking about, right? Jake Browning, of course, and Logan Woodside also on this roster right now, a Tennessee backup for a bunch of years. Cleveland, we mentioned it. Deshaun Watson's contract didn't get touched this offseason, which seems like a positive thing from one perspective, but it's actually a sign of weakness. It's a sign of disbelief a little bit, maybe a lack of hope, lack of faith. This is year 3 of a 5-year fully guaranteed $230 million contract. I don't need to say that again. You already know. They did a cap conversion last year, taking almost $45 million of salary into signing bonus. It was a huge conversion. Generally speaking, with these quarterback contracts, you try to do every other year, right? Mahomes has earned a roster bonus and then converted his next one into a signing bonus, and et cetera. And Josh Allen has sort of followed suit in Buffalo as well. So it's not unnatural for Cleveland to do a big one last year and none this year, but with a team that was up against the cap for most of the offseason because of other situations and plenty of other contracts and mouths that have been fed, generally speaking, you would have expected in year 3 of a 5-year contract, the team to feel comfortable pushing some of the cap, right? Even if it's just a small $15 million conversion, some of the cap to get this thing into the low 50s for the 2024 season. They didn't touch it. All right. And you don't touch it because you are preserving your future, your financial future. Right now, there's a 1 void year on this contract. It's got about $9 million of dead cap. The second you do this, right? And let's assume they do this again next year for cap purposes, you're going to add 2 void years. You'll have 3 void years. You probably have upwards of $21 million of void cap. That's just going to hit 2027 unless you extend this player. And that's the ultimate conversation here is, as of right now, there's probably not a world where they envision Deshaun Watson being extended in Cleveland. Now, that can change in 7 plays this season because he certainly had moments last year, but then he had injuries last year as well. But year 3, he's going to carry the highest cap in the league, and we're just going to have to live with it, and he's going to have to live with it because he knows what that means. Okay, his agents have probably been pretty upfront about what's happening here, and at age 29, he's got a real chance to turn things around for the positive. He's got boy, a heck of a lot of negatives attached to him. And the contract, unfortunately, is one of them from a lot of the fans' perspectives. So big year, big year for Deshaun Watson and this contract. Behind him, speaking of, not having faith in your QB1, they went out and got Jameis Winston. They went out and brought Tyler Huntley over from Baltimore, and they kept Dorian Thompson-Robinson on this roster, even though I thought he was a pretty clear-cut backup quarterback trade candidate this offseason. They're carrying depth. They're carrying the ability to hopefully keep this thing together if Watson goes down again, not unlike we saw in 2023. They were mildly successful doing this with the Flacco run. I think they're prepared to do it again. Big year for Watson. Big year. I'm going to gloss over Dak Prescott, quite frankly, because if you don't know where Dak Prescott is financially speaking, you have been living under a rock for the past 6 months. But just to summarize, it's an expiring contract. They've paid him a roster bonus already of $5 million. It was actually converted to signing bonus for cap purposes. That's the only thing they've done with this contract. There is a $40 million plus voidable dead cap hit sitting in 2025 if they don't extend him before March 12th, which is the start of the league year. This void happens after that, which makes this contract not expiring during the franchise tag window, which makes him a non-franchise tag candidate. He cannot be tagged. He's got a no trade clause. So if Dallas is 1-7 at the trade deadline, Dak's going to have full control over Dallas or the Cowboys trying to get any kind of value from him at the trade deadline, which would be insane, but you never know where we're headed here. That's it. That's all you need to know. They're actively working on a contract. I believe everything coming out of Dallas. They are not shy about their intentions, which is they want this guy for 8 years. He wants to sign for 4. I don't think he'll give in even 1 iota. He wants to play out this year, get another signing bonus, and have 4 more years, 3 of them fully guaranteed through age 35. And as long as there's a 6 in front of that average salary number, he'll be totally happy with everything and good to go. I think Dallas will cave, but I have been saying publicly for the most of this offseason that if I'm Dak Prescott, truly, I'm going to free agency. I'm saying no to every single offer. And I am letting March 12th happen so that 3 or 4 teams can reassess my market value and not just Jerry Jones. Trey Lance and Cooper Rush, both expiring contracts behind him. All 3 quarterbacks on the Dallas Cowboys will need some sort of contract for the 2025 season. Bo Nix has, let's just say his stock has been rising every single day that he's been a Denver Bronco. And now that actual preseason gameplay is happening, I would expect that to vault into clear QB1 status. I know Zach Wilson has had a sniff, and I know Jared Stidham was sort of signed to be their backup plan if and when the Russell Wilson stuff blew up in their face. Well, guess what? The Russell Wilson stuff blew up in their face, and they about faced on that entire contract and are taking the highest dead cap hit in the history of the NFL this year at $53 million. And Jared Stidham had some guaranteed salary in 2024. They have paid him a roster bonus in 2024, so it seems like he's going to be a $10 million backup quarterback. That's just what it appears to be. It sounds like the Bo Nix era is going to start right away, and Stidham will just be a high-paid backup. And Zach Wilson probably doesn't make this roster. I don't know why you'd carry all 3 in this scenario, unless you're really going to slow play Bo Nix a little bit. And then you need some sort of coverage for Jared Stidham. And then certainly Zach Wilson is able to be that at the very least. I know he's not able to be Aaron Rodgers stand-in at this point in time, which we saw last year, but he is a viable QB2, as is Jared Stidham. Jared Stidham's making $10 million this year, though. So it's a Taylor Heineke conversation, but at least there's somewhat of a need here from an overall quarterback room standpoint. Jared Goff got the bag that we expected him to get, maybe even a little bit more. The guarantee structure is, I think, right in line with where it should be for his age and where he's been and what he's already been paid. It's a 4-year contract. It's a 5-year total on a 4-year extension, but it's a 4 for 194-ish. That takes him into his age 33 season. That's a really comfortable setup for this Detroit team that, man, they've been pressing. And and you didn't know how the post Matthew Stafford era was going to look, and they went back to ground and pound, and maybe they've over asseted themselves on the running game a little bit, but they look the part, and they attacked their defense hard from a free agency standpoint, and they extended their offense aggressively in 2024. Certainly the left tackle, the right tackle, the wide receiver one, and Jared Goff, just to name a few. This is just what it's going to be. This is maybe one of the top 3 teams in the NFC right now. There's certainly some argument being made there. It's pretty fun. If the Bears are good, and we know the Packers will be, and we know this Detroit team will be, it's a pretty fun division, especially with winter and snow and all sorts of elements that can come into play. I am in Buffalo, and I have no rooting interest in the NFC North. I'm looking forward to it like crazy. It's maybe my favorite division of all football this year. So what the Detroit Lions have done, not only to keep this thing afloat, but to actually take another level, take another step, is pretty damn awesome. And like I said, I think every contract, with the exception of Sewell's, which, boy, in the grand scheme of things, seems real bloated. And not that he's not worth it. He is. But when Tristan Wirfs took less than him, pretty much across the board, 2-year, 3-year, APY, all that, it made me think that the Lions overshot their shot a little bit with that Sewell contract. But look, they're happy. He's happy. It's not for me to say. I'm just telling you, in comparison, it feels like things got a little wonky there. And who am I to say that Jared Goff's blind side and right side shouldn't be taken care of? Because they are. And they are for 3 years, basically fully guaranteed. Jordan Love got $55 million a year. It's a 4-year contract. It's a different version of a 4-year contract than what Tua signed, as we talked about a couple episodes ago. There's certainly a lot to love, no pun intended, with this Green Bay offense. A lot of rookie contracts, and now Jordan Love comfortably locked in for 3 years, at least 4 years, practically speaking. Over $100 million, fully guaranteed at signing. That's pretty big stuff for a guy who's got like 9 starts. It's going to be one of those contracts we just watch and monitor week in and week out, because you got a hell of a lot of money on a very small sample size. And this organization as a whole has been blessed to pieces at this position. So the second he stops looking like Aaron Rodgers, even for a week, it's going to be topic of conversation, unfortunately. And it's not going to matter an inch. Okay. Because for the next 3 seasons, this contract is rock solid. Totally locked in. 40 million more locks in next March. 20 million of 2027 locks in March of 2026. It's just about as good as you can do from where he started to where he is today. He took a 1-year sample size, and because of a bridge extension and timing and all sorts of things, just made the absolute most of it. Sean Clifford from Penn State's behind him, probably stands in as the QB2 for most of 2024, if not all. And we get to Houston, who is deep in every freaking position on the roster. And they did this intentionally. We know it. Okay. Anybody who was on the trade block, they called and brought in a lot of them. Okay. They're not saying no to anything right now. And it's an interesting way to operate. It's a good way to operate when you've been out of the game for this long and you know you have your guy. That's what CJ Stroud is. He gives you the ability, especially right now in his rookie contract, right? This is year 2. There's tons of wiggle room. Can't even talk about an extension until after 2025. That's when things will get fun. And then you structure that extension so that you have financial freedom through 2027, most likely, right? So we're talking 4 good seasons of financial flexibility, at least from a cap perspective, right? There'll be some cash payments in there, but from a cap perspective, they've got a 4-year window where they can play with house money. And part of that is bringing in everybody, seeing what you got, seeing what CJ Stroud works with best, putting some adults in the room in certain areas, and hoping you can sneak one out when his value is 100% maximized. I'm not going to put it against them. I think the coach is the right coach. We'll see what kind of offensive scheming they can put together with CJ Stroud, who might be limitless right now in that regard. And we'll see if they have enough firepower weapons, because they've got some names, but do they have that one name, that one guy that can really take them to the next level that we've seen teams and offensive have to go through? Even Tom Brady's offense at the time needed a Randy Moss to really take that next level. We'll see. We'll see what CJ Stroud can do with plenty of options and certainly a heck of a lot of ability, at least through year one. Davis Mills and Case Keenum and Tim Boyle, all experienced quarterbacks sitting behind him. So a little bit like Cleveland, they are ready to hold this thing together, even if Stroud takes a little injury hit here, which, it'd be crazy to not at least expect something in 2 full years of football at this position with this, the speed that this game offers. It's just good business if you can afford it to have experienced quarterbacks sitting behind them, as long as your guy can handle it. And there's a lot of that, right? Got to get rid of the elephant in the room backup, because the second that my guy throws an interception, the fan base is going to turn on him. I don't think that's going to happen here. C.J. Stroud has about as much clout as a rookie quarterback heading into year 2 as maybe ever had in this league. And that's just a fact. Anthony Richardson, year 2 of his rookie contract. It looked good for a minute, literally. And then all of the expectations we had with his style of play and lack of experience turning into an injured player is exactly what we got, unfortunately. This year, they've got Joe Flacco sitting behind him on just maybe the best resurrected career story we've had in this league in quite a long time. Came from the couch to the postseason with Cleveland, got himself $4.5 million fully guaranteed to back up Anthony Richardson this year in Indianapolis. They're hoping for a little bit of magic is all. They're hoping for Anthony Richardson to stay healthy, first of all, but if and when, it's Joe Flacco, possible Indianapolis Colts savior for 2024. Trevor Lawrence, didn't know if that contract was coming, as I mentioned last week. It came. It's big. It's huge. It stands apart from the Tuas and the Jordan Loves because he was, after year 3, extended as early as humanly possible. So you're ripping up 2 years of rookie contract. You're tacking on 5 more. So this is a 7-year contract. It's got a total payout of $306. That's highly unlikely. What is likely, though, are the next 5 seasons. So Jacksonville's taking a big swing here. Big, and I think there's a lot of people out there, maybe even a lot of Jacksonville fans, that thought, let's just wait 1 more season and see at least a little bit more clearly where the hell we are with him and some of these other things. And you could tell March 14th, 24 hours into free agency, that this was just not going to be the case. All right. They are giving him everything humanly possible to, I don't know if hold him up or bolster him is the right way to say this, but whatever deficiencies they now know Trevor Lawrence has, they're going to try to overcompensate with in other areas of the roster. And look, Travis Etienne staying healthy is a big part of that. And everybody in the room knows it. When he is healthy and he is doing his thing, I fully expect an extension for that player in the coming weeks, in season. They will not screw around with letting him get close to free agency, in my opinion, even though he's at a position that doesn't really come with much bidding war, though it did have a nice offseason with the Barkleys and the Swifts of the world. So 5 years, practically guaranteed, most of it fully guaranteed right now. That makes it for a 5-year, $202 million practicality on its surface right now. Mac Jones and CJ Beathard are competing for the QB2 spot. I don't know if both of those players stick. They have very similar outlooks. Mac Jones had his contract split up here a little bit on his way out of the New England Patriots. I would imagine that the $2.7 million salary is good enough to keep, that he's, as a player as a whole, is good enough to keep. Is he going to embrace his backup role? I don't know. You never know how things are going inside that locker room right now, but I would imagine one of those 2 players falls off, and both have starting quarterback experience. So this could be something to watch from a waiver claim perspective or something like that. Patrick Mahomes, they sweeten the pot. They should be good for 3 more seasons, all things considered. And I guess that's only part of the story here, truly. We talk about this being a contract through 2027. Here's the cash flow: 45, 50, 56, 53 through 2027. The problem is this: there's still 4 years remaining after that, and he'll be 32 going on 33. He's the unicorn. They're just going to do whatever it takes. But anyone else with this contract, and nobody else would have this contract to start with, but anybody else with this contract, you'd be looking at 4 years remaining and say, man, the Chiefs got a great deal here. And you just know that 32-year-old Patrick Mahomes, even at 90% of what he is today, is going to have all the power in the world to step into any front office and say, all right, it's time to just start over. Here we go. The cap is $325 million, and I want to be 15% of it minimum. Right? So, it's just where we're going to be. By the way, that math is not high enough. He's going to have to be 20 to 24% of that $325 million salary cap because, look, we're going to have $75 million players by 2028. So it's going to be a fact. The NBA is not lying, and the NFL is not going to be lying either. They're all kind of going in the same gigantic revenue stream direction. Carson Wentz appears to be the lock for the QB2 behind Patrick Mahomes, though Ian Book at least has a chance to stick, though I don't know if he's a practice squad candidate going forward. Justin Herbert, man, a lot of changes in LA. Herbert's already banged up a little bit with his foot. The contract is rock solid. We'll see what this new coaching staff, new front office, new everything basically outside of the defense can do to, I don't know, it just feels like such a transition year in LA, as I've said before. But this is year 2. All right, this is year 2 of a 7-year contract. 6 of those years are practically guaranteed. Rock solid. Kyler Murray stuff contract here. Signing bonus, double option bonus, big base salaries. So you could have conversions along with signing bonuses. There's tons of cash flow opportunities here. I mean, he's going to make just a boatload of money. He's making $73 million cash this year because of the balloon payments. He's going to make, he's making $56 million this year. He's going to make $60 million next year. So, overcompensating this year for keeping things kind of cash friendly in 2022 and 2023. And then we'll see. I mean, I don't have to tell you, there's 5 more years in this thing before they even consider ripping up and starting over. How many iterations of the Chargers offense, or maybe even of the coaching staff, are we going to see in those next 5 years? It's really tough to project this team in any direction. Easton Stick has a couple of games under his belt. It seems like he's the lock. Max Dugan and Casey Bauman, a couple of UDFAs, trying to latch on probably from a P squad perspective for the Chargers. Matthew Stafford got his pot sweetened a little bit here, both for 2024 and with a 2025 roster bonus guarantee. He seems healthy and happy, and Sean McVay has adjusted the offense to sort of match not only the new personnel, but decline in Matthew Stafford's game, which is not a knock. It is a reality. And good on McVay for reading the room and reading the temperature and understanding how to maximize everything about his roster. And we'll see what kind of maximization it's going to take with the loss of Aaron Donald on the defensive side of the ball. It's Stafford, like I said, pretty solid through 2025, though they could use that as a buyout guarantee if they had to get off this thing in 2025. Jimmy Garoppolo's on a 1-year, basically minimum. It looks like 3 and change with some incentives, but Stetson Bennett, if he's healthy and he's got his head on straight, there's no reason that he shouldn't slide in as the QB2 at some point in time here. It's probably not going to happen until 2025, but feels like he's taken major steps forward in a lot of ways. And I don't expect Jimmy Garoppolo to have much of a life inside the NFL. Maybe not at all after 2024. We'll see. The Raiders are a complete toss-up, and all of their depth charts and all of their beat reporters and everything about this franchise is saying it could be just a coin toss between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. It should be O'Connell, but Gardner Minshew's contract says much more than he is competing for a job or isn't the lock to be the game. This is $15 million guaranteed. We don't have middle class guarantees at this position in the NFL, and Gardner Minshew and Baker Mayfield and a few others have shown us that it's actually possible. And for him to lose this job and be the QB2 would be devastating for him, because he was handed a contract that basically said, you got to go and get this thing, and we're going to hand you the money when you do. But I think we're leaning towards Aiden O'Connell here. So it's a 1-2 punch. Maybe we're going to see some oscillating back and forth between those two players, but that just has never worked for anybody. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to week 1. But I think right now the read is Aiden O'Connell with a very well-paid Gardner Minshew as the 1B for the Las Vegas Raiders. Tua Tagovailoa signed his big extension. You've heard me talk about it ad nausea. It's a 3-year. All right. That 4th-year guarantee is being classified as a buyout until it's not, because it's only $3 million. Whereas Jordan Love in year 4 is $20 million. That's a much heftier buyout if they have to get out of that contract, though. Doable. All right. We just saw Russell Wilson get paid over $39 million cash to walk away from Denver and into Pittsburgh. So we're seeing that nothing's bulletproof at this position. And certainly year 4 of Tua's extension is in that camp. Mike White is still behind him. Skylar Thompson got a run. Seems like Skylar Thompson could fall off this roster, and you just run with 2 and maybe add somebody to the practice squad who falls off another roster, like a Beathard or somebody like that. But for the most part, I think this organization trusts, that they have done enough to keep Tua upright, though there are some significant offensive line losses this offseason, and that Mike White could step in and at least give them, I don't know, a 4-game run like he did in New York forever ago. Minnesota is up in the air. You can tell me JJ McCarthy gets week 1. You can tell me Sam Darnold starts the first 6 weeks of the year. I believe both right now. And by the way, Nick Mullins as the QB3 has experience. So it's a revolving door there. I know that McCarthy is going to be rushed into action probably as soon as possible. You want to start to build that rapport with Jordan Addison and with Justin Jefferson and with Hawkinson and really everything they have going there. There's not a lot of belief in this team overall success rate. So do you want to put McCarthy through, I don't know, what could be is it going to be a 4-13 season? Maybe. There are some people who think 4.5, 5 wins is this team's ceiling because of how good the division around it is, because of the loss of Cousins and some other things. I think they did a pretty nice job filling in all the voids they lost this offseason. And if McCarthy is stable, or Sam Darnold, who I know not a lot of people believe in, but even if it's 8 weeks, 8 and 8, an 8 and a 9 week split between Darnold and McCarthy, I don't think that that's not serviceable quarterback play, especially with the weapons that are available to them. So I have a little bit more faith in this roster than I think most people do, but I understand if you want to have Sam Darnold go out there and take a bunch of bullets, kind of like a pitcher who's sitting in an 18-0 game, and instead of switching the pitcher, you just continually go out to the mound and say, look, man, we know this sucks, but you got to do it for us. There's a world where Sam Darnold is that long reliever this year that just has to take a bunch of bullets for a team that's not winning games so that McCarthy doesn't get deflated and punched in the face too much in year 1 and can kind of hit the ground running with much, much more under his belt in 2025. 1-year deal for Darnold, by the way, and significant incentives if he's starting games. So as he's getting knocked down and punched in the face, he will be at least earning more money for his services. New England, I guess it's kind of similar. Jacoby Brissett is that guy. He's that version of Sam Darnold for the Patriots. I don't think Bailey Zappi has a future here, especially with how decent Joe Milton has looked. I would expect Drake May to be the week 1 starter. I would expect it. But again, this is a New England Patriots team, not unlike Minnesota, that has been aggressively extending players, adding free agents as if they are preparing to win games. But what happens when they don't? What happens when reality steps in and the game speed, increases dramatically and all the things that they thought might happen? Brissett's on a 1 for 8 with 6.5 fully guaranteed. So basically your top tier in terms of guarantees, top tier backup quarterback pay. That's the QB2. That's it. And that's why there could be some QB1 in there as well. Zappi falls off this roster, probably first round of cuts. Joe Milton's a practice squad candidate that you got to be careful there because he is claimable based on what we've seen and maybe what his available ceiling might be. So a little bit of maneuvering possibly happening in the quarterback room for New England heading towards week 1. Derek Carr got that cap conversion he was looking for. They handed him a signing bonus in March, freeing up a ton of cap space for the Saints, who, as you know, are always right against that threshold and need every little bit of help they can get every single offseason. So his cap dropped, I don't know, $23 million, right? He was in the 35s and it's down to 12.5 this year. And the dead cap is piling up down the road. He's got a $50 million dead hit next year. He's also got, a $10 million fully guaranteed roster bonus for next year. And his $30 million salary locks in March 15th next year. So if he's bad, let's just put this out there. If he's bad, we're talking about that $10 million as a buyout and he's gone. And they're going to post June 1st and most likely and take that $50 million over 2 years. But practically speaking, he's the quarterback for the next 2 seasons. I'm not sure that they have the replacement on the roster right now. They may have drafted that replacement this year. They have kept things very quiet. Spencer Rattler certainly had a nice college career. We'll see if that can translate, at least over the next 12 months of practice, to see where they can get to. But that's the newest rookie, 5th round pick out of South Carolina. Huge high school prospect that didn't super pan out in college, but I guess he's kind of the guy everybody's watching this offseason because, like I said, there's a financial world where Derek Carr walks away from this team after 2024, and there's another financial world where he stays here and makes $40 million. So either way, I'm not sure this is an organization going too far upwards or downwards. It's kind of a stuck moment for this franchise. Kamara probably falls off after this year, like Michael Thomas did this year. Tyrann Mathieu probably falls off next year after a couple of defensive players have in the past. It's just when you operate close to the vest, you have to make big changes every year. It's just what this fan base is used to, and we'll see if that change happens at the quarterback position for the New Orleans Saints after 2024. Speaking of which, the Giants and Daniel Jones, we know where that stands. It's a 1-year guarantee through 2024. There's an injury guarantee in 2025. The reports sound weird out of camp so far. There's some people trying to blow some smoke under him. There's some people trying to knock him down already. I have a little bit of faith that, the neighbors of the world and what I really think is a nice offensive line, though I'm not sure the analytics back me up here. There's at least a world where Brian Daboll can right this ship. We saw him do it in Buffalo. They don't have Josh Allen here. They just don't. They have Daniel Jones. All right. So the ceiling is what it is. But he knows he's on a 1-year deal. That's a pretty good way to operate if you're a team hoping to get the most out of a quarterback. All right. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to save his career as a starting quarterback, not unlike Mac Jones last year, not unlike Zach Wilson when Aaron Rodgers went down. You know the feeling. We'll see if he's up to the task. All right. This is probably the most pressure coming off the injury, knowing that he's on a one and done situation. This is the most pressure he's probably ever gone through as a quarterback. And if he can withstand it in 2024, well, now you got him on value. And you can start to say, we signed the right contract because $40 million for 2 more seasons, or at least 1 more before he's got to get ripped up and started over, is going to be phenomenal value. We'll see. There's a world where this is all positives, but for now, I think it's steering quite negative. Speaking of which, Aaron Rodgers and that New York Jets. Wait, behind him, behind Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, a name we talked about quite a bit because of the size of that backup quarterback contract. And Tommy DeVito, he probably falls off the roster, though I guess if they're keeping 3, they're keeping 3. Drew Lock signed a 1 for 5, almost all fully guaranteed. And by now it is, because that $50,000 hanging out there was a workout bonus. That's been earned at this point in time, despite some injury stuff right now. He's got a ton of incentives for starts, for playing time, for passing, for completion rates, for all sorts of stuff, playoff wins and berths. He's got all the nooks and crannies inside of his contract that at least hint that he may be taking some snaps, some starting snaps. He's not going to win this job outright. Daniel Jones is going to get an opportunity to go out there and say, I'm in this to win. And if he falters, I think even 1 iota, they will pull the plug on Daniel Jones so that he's not re-injured and so they can try to save face with this franchise. They have to. They know their jobs are on the line, all of them, front office all the way down. They know it. They understand that the Daniel Jones contract could be the nail in the coffin. But you put Drew Lock out there and you say, look, we got this guy and look at the team we've assembled where just a little bit more competency at the quarterback position can get us to this next level. And maybe you can resurrect some things. So I fully expect that Lock is in the conversation in 2024 in some capacity, but it's a wait and see. Aaron Rodgers, he took a haircut to come here. He knows what he was, where he is in his career. He is, I believe, honestly, trying to be a team player with this Jets roster, and they have been aggressive both in extending and acquiring. The weapons at least look a little better. I'm not sure I love it. The offensive line definitely looks better on paper. We'll see if Rodgers can figure out, the center position, because it seems like they had so many bad freaking snaps, not only in practice this year, but even last year with Zach Wilson at the helm. And I'm not sure that's been figured out, but he's on a 2-year contract. He's 40 going on 41 here. He's on a 2-year contract. His cap hits are nice and low because of void years and all that sort of fun stuff. But he's a $38 million guy this year. He's only got $6 million cash next year. Okay, so for all intents, if he's going to stick around, you're going to rip it up or extend at least to keep those void years intact. And some semblance of Aaron Rodgers can exist at around, 1 for 45, whatever it's going to take. We've seen this happen before with Brady, and I don't think it'll be unlike that for Aaron Rodgers if this Jets situation works out. They are defense heavy, improved offensive line. Breece Hall's probably a superstar. Garrett Wilson should be a superstar. All right, there's moments. And I think there's some fantasy people out there at least agreeing with me on those players and maybe a few more. So Rodgers doesn't have to be back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers. He just doesn't. He just has to be IQ Aaron Rodgers. All right. And that has been serviceable for aging veteran quarterbacks in this league. Okay. Peyton Manning has won Super Bowls really with just his IQ. He didn't even have a freaking arm at that point in time. Rodgers has an arm. And Rodgers knows what he's doing out there. And he knows more than ever that he just has to be healthy and let his brain do the work. And there should be enough weapons to win games. The Jets are tied with the Bills to win this division from an odds standpoint. Call that fodder. Call that whatever you want. But I don't believe what I'm saying is incorrect. All right. And he's on an expiring contract. Not that that matters to him, but maybe to some it does. Tyrod Taylor brought over from the Giants to be his QB2. Jordan Travis drafted, I believe, to be the eventual successor in New York if he can get himself fully healthy off a nasty injury and up to speed. He's got plenty of veterans in front of him now and a system that could become something he can get used to. But there's a plan in place. All right. Tyrod Taylor can run a team for 6 weeks. If Aaron Rodgers goes down, Rodgers should be much more privy to his age and how to play in this age group. And there may even be the possible quarterback of the future on this roster already. So I knocked the Jets quite a bit. They do have some pieces in place to at least contend this year and maybe even keep the band together for a couple of years here. Jalen Hurts, speaking of negativity, I just don't understand what's happening in Philly, but I just hope they're better because this roster has been well built. I respect the hell out of the GM and Howie Roseman, even though I don't necessarily agree with how he does all of his contract structures. This is one of those where you just have to bite it off and chew it because they built in every option bonus imaginable. All right. It's a $23 million signing bonus and 5 option bonuses to follow. This is year 2 of a 6-year contract. 4 more of these years are fully guaranteed for practical purposes. He's got fully guaranteed 2026 salary out of the gate. Okay. In fact, right now, all of his 2026 compensation is fully guaranteed. That's a 2-year early vesting trigger. So again, I don't fully agree with everything that Howie Roseman does. That might be a perfect example of it right there, because I wasn't super positive that Jalen Hurts was the guy. You know, it was kind of in that Trevor Lawrence world, even though much more postseason success to talk about here. But I just hope this doesn't go backwards, because it did last year quite a bit. And now we're starting to get some drama with it, and who knows. But as long as things start to take steps back forward, this contract will be just fine. I don't think I can say it's just fine right now, and I don't think that's being negative Nelly. Behind Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett came over from Pittsburgh on a fair trade. I believe he's fully guaranteed for 2 more seasons in Philadelphia. And then Will Grier came over as a experienced backup quarterback, I guess we call him at this point in time. Yeah, Kenny Pickett fully guaranteed through 2025. They'll decline that 5th-year option at that point in time. We'll see if he sticks. It's certainly one of those salaries you could just eat to walk away from if you had to. But my guess is he's exactly the kind of gunslinger you want sitting behind Jalen Hurts. Doesn't threaten him, but might even be able to help for a couple of weeks if you have to get to that role. Speaking of having somebody sitting behind you, Pittsburgh started over from Kenny Pickett with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson at a combined $4 million. That's what they're doing. That's 2024. Kyle Allen, a competent backup sitting right now in QB3 land. I would imagine all three of those make the roster because you're talking about $5.5 million cash for all three of those, which, ain't going to break the bank. We'll see. There's a world where Brandon Ayuk joins this roster in the next hour and a half to go with George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. And like I said, there's worse situations out there. And certainly with TJ Watt and a bunch of players on defense, you never know. But I don't think there's a lot of people, certainly from a fantasy perspective, putting too many chips in Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, no matter who they're throwing the ball to. But I'd love to be surprised. Let's put it that way. Both on one-year contracts. Everybody on one-year contracts, by the way. And it's just the who's who of what's going to happen next with all of these players. It's fascinating stuff. Seattle put their foot down on Geno Smith, at least for 2024. He is their guy. He is fully guaranteed now, has been since February. It's an unbelievable value if he's an actual above average QB1. It just is. He's got 2 years left. He's 34 years old, or at least on his way to 34 years old. He's making 22.5 cash this year, and he's set for 25 next year. And, there's an early $10 million roster bonus, but it's not guaranteed at all. There's a 100% out pattern after 2024, just like there was in 2023. This has been year to year since he signed the extension. So it's all or nothing. They've got a good quarterback trying to keep his resurrection, fully going here on really nice roster. One of the better weapon sets in all of football, a much improved offensive line, at least on paper. I don't know if they're going to win a lot of ball games, but this guy's representing at least value on paper right now. And I think that's all you can ask for when you're playing this type of roster building construction game. There aren't many teams that go this route. We don't have a middle class like this. All right. This is Geno. This is Baker. This is Gardner Minshew to some degree. All right. We just don't have this. I'm hoping some of these things work out and that we don't just have top of the mountain or back to the rookie draft pool. But guys like Geno have to take the torch and run with it. We'll see. Philip Walker, Sam Howell, acquired from Washington. That's not a name to forget because he's got starts under his belt. He has overachieved, in my opinion, on a very bad Commanders roster, and he does not have a very bad roster in Seattle. So if he's got to step in for whatever reason, injury, productivity purposes, I think that's the clear QB2 and maybe even a chance to be a QB1 at some point in time this offseason. Brock Purdy, he's the guy for now. That's all I can say. That's all I can tell you. He's got 2 more years left on this contract. Mr. Irrelevant, a 4-year contract. If he was a UDFA, by the way, if he was drafted one place after, which means undrafted, this would be an expiring contract and he'd be set for restricted free agency and have a bunch more options under his belt, but he doesn't. Is it going to stop San Francisco from extending him after 2024? It might. I think his agent, Kyle Strongen, would have plenty to say about that. And you'd be seeing Brock Purdy standing in a baseball cap for much of next offseason. But I just don't think it's a slam dunk that this guy with this roster and this front office and that coach believe that they have to pay this guy immediately. And I know the quarterback should operate differently. But we saw this with Nick Bosa, and we've seen it with Brandon Ayuk, and we saw it with Deebo Samuel, and we see it with Trent Williams. Everybody's playing hardball because they have to, because San Francisco has shown that they will go to the finish line with a bunch of these players. Will they go to the finish line with their quarterback? To me, it's one of those most fascinating things to watch in 2024. Because if he's good, or if he's better, let's put it that way, if he's better than he's been, which is hard to say, but if he's better, if he continues to improve as the 49ers quarterback, there's just no way in hell that you can enter the 2025 offseason without an extension in mind. But if he's still Brock Purdy and the McCaffreys of the world, right, are the ones holding up this offense, there's at least a conversation to be made about replacing him with Trey Lance. No, obviously not. That's not the name. But with somebody who might have a little bit more pedigree, a little bit more experience, and maybe a higher ceiling. That is nothing against Brock Purdy. He's been freaking fantastic. And we are judging him because of where he got drafted. The whole world is. All of these people, all of these teams, all of these scouts said you are worth number 262. But now all of a sudden you're worth $62 million a year. Yeah, that's exactly what could be happening. Okay. He could be going from number 262 to $62 million a year within a 3-year span. But they might make him wait. And if they do, you think the Ayuk stuff's fun. Get ready for Brock Purdy offseason, because that could be coming in 2025. It is Brandon Allen and, boy, Josh Dobbs. That's a fun name. Sitting there ready to poach in San Francisco if need be. Baker Mayfield got the 3 for 100. It's a 1 for 40 until it's not. It's a franchise tag that has additional years of term on it. And that's exactly what they wanted. They got exactly what they wanted out of that contract. Baker gets a really nice payday. One I don't think he ever saw coming over 2-3 years of his NFL career that was just plummeting through Cleveland and Carolina. He resurrected himself at least for a season, took him into the playoffs, won a playoff game, bagged himself $40 million guaranteed. We'll see if he can turn that into 60, 80, or even 100 million over the next 2-3 seasons if he can stick on this contract. Kyle Trask, expiring contract. John Wolford, a seasoned backup vet. Trask probably falls off this roster, if I had to guess right now. And they P-squad somebody and go from there. It's a big Will Levis season. As we've talked about, Tennessee has been maybe the most aggressive team this offseason from a positive and negative standpoint. And they're not even done right now. They continue to add as we have these conversations. Quandre Diggs got a 1 for 3, basically fully guaranteed. And we'll see what they do with some of these camp cuts and things like that as they just continue to bolster the roster. Hopkins has an injury. They might need another wide receiver body heading into week 1. So just keep your eyes perked constantly with the Tennessee Titans. They do not appear ever to be settled and ready for battle. They are constantly in motion. Mason Rudolph brought over from Pittsburgh to be the QB2 behind Will Levis, because I believe the Malik Willis era is done in Tennessee. Jaden Daniels, one of the most exciting names of 2024 out of the gate. Year 1 of his rookie contract. It's obviously the 4 plus the 5th-year option. All signs point to great. That's all I'm going to say with that. All signs point to great. They're signing people. They're acquiring people. They're extending people. It seems like they're turning a corner. Is this the 2024 Houston Texans, the team that we thought might have been a year away, but said, screw that, we're going to do this right now? Could be. Look out for the Commanders. Marcus Mariota on a fully guaranteed $6 million behind him, and Jeff Driscoll with some veteran experience on a minimum salary sitting behind him as well. That's it. We did it. Basically every quarterback active in the league right now, sans a couple of names I couldn't pronounce or didn't realize were even in the league, which certainly should fall off the roster in the next couple of weeks here. But look, none of this is set in stone. We don't know a couple of the QB1s, of course. We're going to have some more issues. We may have an extension, right? We may have an extension in Dak Prescott. And we'll see what some of these other storylines come out to. But for the most part, I think we have a good tight window on 2024. And hopefully this sheds some light on 2025, at least for many of these team situations, some of which are rock solid, many of which are at least, we'll see. And that's the beauty of the NFL. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.